Everyone. Welcome back to Carb Addict, now Carnivore. And I'm Lana McCara, and I'm really excited today to welcome my good friend and mentor, Scott Dunnett. Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be here and looking forward to it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your workshop so we can get people a little grounded in what you do.
Well, I've been either a participant, a co-leader, or a lead facilitator for the Way Through workshop. It's had multiple incarnations, but that's its present day name. And it's all about releasing and letting go of old roles. So originally created and set up for actors and actresses who got stuck in long-term roles. Once they created the workshop and started doing it, they found that not only did it address the roles that these folks had taken by choice for a job, but it also addressed every role that they ever took either by choice or by necessity throughout the course of their life, all the way back to early childhood. And once a few of these workshops happened, they realized that it was much more than an actor-actress workshop, and they opened it up to the public. It's been happening out in California under the name of Mastery, also in Vancouver, and as well as in Ontario and now in Florida.
Yes.
So it's been a focal point of my life for the last 35 years.
Yes, and I have been there. And that's why I reached out to you because I experienced it and it's powerful. It's extremely powerful. Wonderful. So yeah, that's why I wanted you to come and talk with us a little bit because the Way Through workshop isn't specifically talked about in terms of overcoming addiction. But yet, when I was there, I realized, that so many people there are in the middle of it. They have those cravings. They're trying to get through. They want a different, better way of life. And that's what those of us in the carnivore community are looking for as well. And we've got the addiction, the brain chemistry addiction to carbohydrates. And I interviewed a PhD researcher a couple weeks ago who said that when those certain chemicals hit our brain in processed food, it turns to alcohol.
Wow.
So we are actually getting an alcoholic response in the brain from sugar and other some types of flour, processed foods. And so we are addicts. I had to stand in my kitchen in March of this year and say, I'm an addict. I never thought of myself that way, but I realized that my responses and my cravings were not average, normal things for being hungry. It's more to it than that. So, as we start the conversation, what would you say about this idea of being an addict? What does it mean?
So for me, I always had separated out in my mind drugs and alcohol. And I don't know why I did that, other than the traditional drugs that were out there during my research and development years were all stimulants. And because of the mental disorders that I have, stimulants made me feel normal. So I never became addicted to those hardcore stimulant drugs, cocaine, meth, and some of the harder pharmaceutical drugs. A, because some of them weren't available, and B, the stimulants acted on me a different way than they did normal folks. But alcohol was a different story.
Mm.
So for me, alcohol ran my life from a very young age, 16, 17 years old. My mother's an alcoholic. My father was a workaholic which is a slightly different addictive pattern, but still causes those major disruptions in those, and that I think bring us to a place of dealing with our addictions. So I think for me, alcoholism really came down to a really, really simple moment. I'm sober. I'm aware that I'm an addict. I'm aware that I'm an alcoholic. For me, it was I'm a drunk and I know it, and I would choose to drink. I would follow the craving. I would succumb to the excuses. I would create well versed and fully backed up justifications to be able to do what I thought was very important and necessary for me to be able to be okay. So it was after I had stopped consuming alcohol that those moments for me became critical, in that when I studied the two men who created Alcoholics Anonymous. Remember, Alcoholics Anonymous is a book, and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous are the meetings and such that folks go to, okay? So that book was created and expanded on the 6 principles of the Episcopalian Church. They expanded those out and created 12 steps that all of the people who can choose to can apply their personal addiction in that first line. It's only talked about once in all of the steps. The addiction thing is only talked about once. Everything else is an inside job. Everything else is about what's happening with us, which is why the workshop fits. But back to that basic principle. When these two men got sober, they got sober very differently. Bill got sober in a Cecil B. DeMille's, 10 Commandments. Light came in the hospital window, and he was cured, and he never had another desire to drink. He only had a desire to help other alcoholics realize and understand that they weren't alone. After he got out of the hospital, because he was in the hospital having DTs because he was detoxing from alcohol, he met Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob listened to Bill's story and had a mental and spiritual conversion on a light level, meaning he made a choice to not drink. And he lived every day of the rest of his life with the desire to drink every day. I'm Dr. Bob. I think about a drink every single day, and I have for the last 35 years. It doesn't go away, and it doesn't stop. Now, I also want to put the preface in. I was a bartender for 20 years. So just because we're standing in the middle of what we have been addicted to does not mean we need to dip in and re-addict ourselves, right? So there was moments where I had that glass in my hand and it was on my way to my mouth, but I was working, so I couldn't. And then I realized, oh, I'm in a dangerous place. So I think that can be another, rabbit hole we go down is, what are those cues and what are those moments when you're in a dangerous place and what can you do about them? But we can chat about that as we go down the line here a little bit.
Yes, putting yourself in harm's way, basically.
Well, yeah, I don't want to stop me from living my life. I got to go to 7-Eleven. I got to stop and get gas in my car. I've got to go to Publix and walk down the produce aisle, and the produce aisle is the wine. My present wife drinks. I buy wine at Aldi's by the 6-pack, right? We've got to be able to go into the grocery store and walk past the boxes in the middle aisles. We've got to be able to walk back past those carbs that we loved, that served us so well, and be able to say, no, not today. Today I chose a different path, and I'm going to maintain this process for today. One day at a time is that clincher. I don't think that makes it small enough. I think there has to be moments where you're willing to go moment to moment, minute to minute, hour to hour, and then expand out into day to day. And that, of course, depends on the effects of our life, and that becomes, I think, more than to putting yourself in a dangerous place. Staying in an emotionally or mental bad place is worse than standing in the middle of a bar as a recovering alcoholic, because it's the sober thought that a drink is a good idea that takes us out. And I've rarely had that sober thought. I've had unconscious action in a bar, but I've never had the sober thought, I think a drink right now would be great. While I was working in a bar, it was always that unconscious thing, because it's obvious. You can look around you and go, wow, there's insanity happening around me. There's people screaming and yelling and talking really loud and showing body parts and being crazy. And it's like, we don't want to be a part of this anymore. We chose something different. I think when it comes out of that, my first wife's, very best friend and one of her sponsors was a member of Overeaters Anonymous. And she wouldn't just do carbs, she would do anything in excess. And one of the tools that she used was to always be staying conscious of where she was emotionally and where she was mentally. And when she was out of bounds, is the words that she used and Catherine used, my late wife. When they were out of bounds, they were out of their right mind. And they needed to be with people who could help them return to their right mind. Right? Because I don't want to drink, I don't want to eat carbs, I don't want to use meth. But when I'm thinking of those things, I'm out of my mind. So I need help to return to my right mind. And I think that was I'm out of bounds. I thought that was a beautiful way of putting that and really making it clear and clean and easy to move back.
Yes, I love that, because the other piece of it that you said that I want to circle back to is when you're not in a good place emotionally and mentally, that's when you actually have a weakness, that something's off balance, it's not right. And my go-to, was mashed potatoes. Now that doesn't sound like anything, you know, that sounds like blah, mashed potatoes, pretty plain. But for me, and I have to tell you, when I sit in my kitchen that day and I realized I was addicted, the first thing that came to my mind, no more mashed potatoes. And I cried. I cried. So let's talk about the emotional aspect of this whole thing.
The initial piece is grief. We touched on it a little bit before we came on, but really getting a handle on those 5 stages of grief. I mean, for most of us, that happens in detox, right? We feel so horrible, we feel so distraught that those emotions come quickly. It's usually the time when we also have the greatest support, right? We're in a detox facility. We're consciously working with another individual who's aware that we are detoxing off of whatever our addiction might be. And in those moments, those stages of grief I think, occur either during that detox period or during the detox period and shortly thereafter, right? Now, we can all get stuck at any point in that process, right? So we're just talking right now for the sake of the conversation that process was moved through relatively clearly. It's like that they got to the other side of that. So then the next question, and this is what the question that came to me. I'd been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 5 years. I hadn't had a drink. I was sponsoring people. I had 2 sponsors myself. I was doing step work. I was doing big book work. I was being in service. I was doing all the things that I needed to do. I was in talk therapy, and I've been in talk therapy for at least 3 years. And I got to a place where I was starting to look at and deal with the emotions that had me drinking in the first place. And for me, and this is not true for everyone, but for me, I did not find the emotional tools that I required in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or in the pages of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I've since talked to folks in AA and in NA, and they said, no, those tools are right there. Look, they're here. I still didn't see them, and they felt like those were the tools they used to work on those emotional pieces. So, to each their own. And for me, that's when I reached out to workshop. For me, depression and getting a handle on attention deficit disorder, and realizing that I wasn't mentally handicapped or autistic or just stupid, because those are the things that I had been told. Those are the things that had been put into my mind, that I was big and mean and scary, and that no one was going to want me. Those were all the things that I had to unravel in those first years. And it was in those moments, that unraveling, that I was the most vulnerable to get loaded again. Those were the moments where I was closest to a drink. Standing in the bar at Tony Roma's or Ruby Tuesdays or one of the other 5 or 6 bars that I worked at over that 20-year period was not one of the scariest places. It was in depression. It was in anxiety. It was in the rabbiting off and the trying to make excuses for my ADD behavior prior to understanding how and why it worked and what it was doing to me and how dyslexia interrupted. Well, if you don't know those things, then you believe something about yourself. And when you believe something about yourself, you do things to help yourself feel better. Well, that's all any of us are trying to do at the beginning of any addiction. We're trying to feel better, trying not to feel like yuck. And then, then the receptors in our brain start accepting carbs or alcohol or meth or whatever those are, and they drop into those receptors and go, I'm okay. It's going to be all right. I'm acceptable. I'm okay. I'm worthy. Whatever our dance was. And for me, it wasn't just one thing. Yeah, I had a list to go down. and that's what really helped, in talk therapy and workshop, because I got to be able to keep going back to workshop and when as I moved through my life, as my first marriage fell apart, after my first wife passed away, and that was after we had separated, I still went back to talk therapy because I was still in love with her. She drank. We had to separate ways. So I had to work through those, and those were dangerous moments for me. Right? Those were the moments where I was closest to a drink, because I knew that, so I surrounded myself with people who I knew would remind me of what I wanted. which was to stay sober and not drink.
That brings me to another point that I don't have notes. We're just talking here, but the great days, the celebration days, and the low days.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find in the people that I talk to is celebrations. Celebrations are loaded with sugar and non-food items that we think we can't live without. Who has a birthday without having a cake?
Precisely. Yeah. And who would have a celebration without a cocktail? And agreed. It's like in those moments of great emotional upheaval and joy and wonder and celebration is emotional upheaval. You can feel it. There's endorphins running and there's chemical change happening, and those things in and of themselves, especially someone who's dealing with a carb addiction or a food addiction, those are going to trigger even more, right? They're going to trigger even more than the thought that, oh, I know what would make this moment perfect. We should open a bottle of champagne. Now, I can tell you that how many times I've had champagne in my mouth. Twice. But I've thought what a great idea champagne would be at least 25 times over the last 35 years, right?
Yeah.
So I can't imagine how many times we connect food and not real food to those moments of celebration, be they happy, be they sad, be they neutral, be they for school or for work or for a celebratory moment of culture or birthday party or any of those things. And they got to come fast and furious, I'm assuming. And those are those moments where you've got to have a couple of cues in your head that when you feel that happening, you can go to those cues. And I think that's the power of emotion. It's like one of the things that we teach in workshop is when you feel triggered, it's a tether to the trauma. If you'll go down to the trauma and just be with that for a second and remember how that felt, well, then whenever you feel that, anytime, that then becomes a positive trigger for you to say, I need some support right now because I'm triggered. And it's an automatic feeling that happens before our unconscious thought of, well, we should open a bottle of champagne, or we should have a cake. There should be cupcakes with this, which is a reasonable thought until you found out you were carb addicted, which was a reasonable thought for normal people to open a bottle of champagne and celebrate a promotion. It happens a million times a day. It's what champagne was made for. Except for me. It wasn't made for me that way. It wasn't made for you that way.
So the trigger feeling is a signal to go get some help.
Yeah.
Talk to someone, get near someone, hug someone.
I think it's past the trigger, because the trigger itself takes us somewhere, and that somewhere is the why. The trigger is just the tool, and I know that one of the things that we're told so often, especially in recovery, is to avoid triggers. And crazy as it might be, here I am disagreeing with that. And I don't suggest, that if you're already in a vulnerable place, but for the most part, when you're triggered, it's information that is coming to light. And if you'll just breathe and follow that connection, because the trigger is on the top, it actually happened to somebody else. Somebody else is having an experience and it's triggering you. And it's making you remember your experience, which makes you want to act on your addiction. Well, if you'll just follow that down and catch the feeling of what had you drink, eat, addict, make your addictive moves in the first place, then it's that feeling that we want to address. It's that feeling that we want to remember and say, I need a hug. I need to connect. You know, back in the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was 5 cents for a phone call. So every drunk was supposed to carry a roll of nickels in his pocket. He said he'd have 20 shots at finding someone to help him. 20 phone calls, right? Whatever your thing might be, right? So for me, I closed my eyes. I said the Serenity Prayer really fast, and I came back out with a breath. And that I would do, like when I mentioned earlier, when I was like just in the moment in the bar, and then I'm having the unconscious thought, and then I'm like, you were just thinking of having a drink. You can't do that. You're at work and you're a drunk, dude. Right? So then I just close my eyes real quick, do the Serenity Prayer real fast, come out breathing, and then serve the beer to the person who's supposed to be getting it. Right? So those moments, I think, are critical, and they are about learning ourselves. Those are our triggers. Those are our part of it, right? And that way I can be anywhere I want to be, no matter what's going on in that space. It doesn't matter if there's all this beautiful, because let's face it, some of those processed foods, they're freaking gorgeous. They're so pretty they make your mouth water. How are you supposed to stop from that? I've made cocktails that people screamed at. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. It's like, it's booze. It's food. Right? Yet we make it into something wonderful. And if we can be around that wonderful and stay empowered to make our own conscious choices, I think that's got to be the goal, instead of trying to protect myself from potential triggers, make sure that I don't go into a 7-Eleven or an LLB or an ABC liquor, or in your case, anywhere that serves anything that is food. Right?
That's everywhere, pretty much.
Everywhere. Yeah. Anything that you're going to do anywhere. I mean, I walked into the space here, and it's a massage studio. There's food here. Mm-hmm. There's snacks, there's treats, there's Starburst, there's a bonbon, there's healthy food, but it's all carbs. Healthy, yummy, Quest bar, carbs.
Yeah. I taught a course at the library yesterday. I teach a fiction course there once a month, and there were muffins on the table. The library staff had put muffins on the table with some napkins. They thought they were being very kind, to us. But when I walked in and I saw that there, I went, oh. I wasn't tempted to eat any of them, but still, it was another reminder. It's everywhere, and it hits you like this unexpectedly out of the blue. So I love that idea of getting in tune with the feeling under the trigger.
Yeah. I think that's key. That's how I use it.
Yeah.
And that requires going in. I mean, you're familiar with the workshop. It's all about that. I created a reflexology company, a business, my little groove, and it's all based on the same stuff. It's all based on how are our emotions running, driving our wonder and our destruction? It's like if we're willing to really get in there and look at, you know, the work of Louise Hay, the work of some of these women, and it's mostly women in this particular realm, are doing when they're making a connection between our physical body and our emotional body, and what's happening when we manifest these negative emotions and these negative thought patterns into our body. It's cancer, it's pain, it's hurt, it's addiction. And how can we then become stewards of our body, and more importantly, you know, of our mind, and really be on purpose and intentional, and operating from a place of personal empowerment, so that, you know, my kids have never seen me drink. They don't even hesitate to order a cocktail when we're out. They don't even remember that I don't drink, because to them, there's no energy on it. I've got dear friends of mine who are more concerned about having a glass of wine in front of me than my kids have ever been. And I think that's a testament to you know, my ability or my choice to make it a non-thing. It's not something for other people to operate with. I mean, those ladies at the library, they were being nice. They were being thoughtful and kind and compassionate. Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll go up and get some muffins, and we'll put them on the table, some napkins, and a couple of little things of water. They'll love it. It'll be so wonderful. We'll be heroes. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, trigger moment. And what are you going to do with that? You're going to smile and move along. And
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Isn't that perspective? We all have our perspectives, and the things that some people will see as amazing, other people see as awful, and what we see as awful, they think is amazing. And it's just, that's just the way it is being a human being moving in this world, you know, with everybody having their own ideas. Um, Something that I've studied a lot and have worked with too as a healing practitioner myself is this idea of what you were talking about, that those emotions get stuck in the body, and then they create pain, they create all kinds of different diseases and sickness and so forth. um but also this blaming thing, you know, blaming myself for being tempted kind of a idea.
mm-hmm.
To talk a little bit about the fact that when we have these stuck emotions, you know, and I had a massive amount in my shoulder at one point. My shoulder was killing me all the time. Doesn't hurt me anymore since I cleared that out. But the addiction gets activated when this is hit, you know, with some memory or some event, you know, that comes into this part where we have this stored stuff.
Yeah.
Then the addiction rises, you know, like it comes out. So how do you deal with this idea of emotions stuck in the body? How do you clear that?
So I think first of all, there's two ways to get emotion stuck. I stick it myself. And there's other moments where I can be in emotion and have someone grab me or touch my body, or try to support me in holding me or grabbing me, or thinking that they're helping me by pulling me in a certain way. And then months later, I'd be grabbed in that same place and go right back to that emotion, right? That emotion was stuck there. I think what we deal with more is the first one, is that classic from Beetlejuice where the roach crawls through his mouth, and he grabs it in his mouth and opens his suit jacket, and he spits the roach into his pocket and closes his jacket and says, "I'm going to save that for later." Right? And that's what we do. I can't deal with this. I'm going to save it for later. This is overwhelming. I'm going to save it for later. this is embarrassing or shaming or hurts too much. I'm going to save it for later. I'm not capable of even processing this. I'm not old enough. I'm not aware enough. I'm not, functional in my mind enough to even process this, and I can't, and it becomes a blacked out memory. So, in working with those and clearing those old emotions, I advocate for the awareness, the touch it and release it. So I have to become aware of, speak it, give it voice. Then we call it owning. Now, I don't want to come from a place of, I'm going to take this and I'm going to buy this and I'm going to own this forever, because that's not the kind of ownership that I'm talking about. The kind of ownership I'm talking about is where you go back to that emotion, like we were talking about earlier. You're going back to that emotion, the original one that hurt, that you saved for later, that was too overwhelming, that hurt too much, or that you simply couldn't process and you've now become aware of. We need to feel that for a second. We need to feel why we were afraid, why we were overwhelmed, why we couldn't do it in the first place, because it's that feeling and that emotion and that energy that needs to be cleared. And unless we're willing to just touch it, we don't know what it is. And the moment we touch it, it wakes up wherever it is in our body. And then it's ready for release. Well, then we have to be able to release that in a productive, safe manner that doesn't require any kind of violence in any way, shape, or form. So not even gestalt, not even taking a pillow and punching a pillow. No violence, only expression, right? So that can be scream, that can be yell, that can be cry, that can be whine and fuss, that can be right, that can be articulate out, that can be swim, that can be exercise. But it's not beating a drum. It's not beating a pillow. It's not violently, aggressively. It can be violently, aggressively upheaval coming out of your body. But if you're gonna use your physical to put it, you're gonna put it back in. You're gonna put pieces of it back in. So it has to be a clean release. I advocate, voice, using our voices and using our expression to release those things. And I've also watched my wife use the power of writing and bringing people through writing prompts and through a process of going deep on that, do some amazing work about identifying, owning, and releasing this old stuck trauma. And remembering that some of it we chose to save and other we didn't. All of it is releasable, and it's irrelevant how it got stored or stuck. Whether we chose to or we couldn't, it's still stuck. The process for release is the same. You have to identify, own, and then release. So that's my thought on it. I know there's other ways as well. I don't
Yeah.
know those.
Yes. Well, let's talk a little bit about the workshop, because I want people to have access to that information. I actually recommended someone that I know in the community to come to the workshop because they're having so much trouble with stuck, and jump on the hamster wheel, jump off, jump on the hamster wheel, jump off. The cycle, So I've experienced it. It helped me tremendously. It was a pivot in my progress, my personal development progress. I feel such a difference even now. It's been 6-8 months ago that I went. So tell us a little bit about where it is and how long and how to get that information about when and so forth.
So www.thewaythroughexperience.com. I can't make that one any shorter, but I'm sure we can drop that into the feed after the fact. But that's the website. once you get to the website, you can make choices. Then we have a Facebook page. We have a page and a group. The group is for folks to come and check it out. What did you find here? I had a friend and they told me about it. I wanted to come and look at the page and see what, or rather the group, and see what's going on here. What are people talking about? And perhaps even ask a couple of questions. The page is a private page, and it is for people who have done the workshop only. And it's a resource page. That's a place for them to come back and say, I'm struggling with this. I would like some support, and be able to get that support directly from and with the language of the folks from the workshop. It's in Melbourne. We are exclusively doing it in Melbourne at this point. It's a $350 financial investment, and it's a 32 to 36 hour 3-day time investment. So that's Friday night from 7 o'clock until about 11 or 12 at night. The ending times are approximate. And then Saturday from 9 in the morning until about 11 o'clock p.m. And then Sunday morning, again, 9 o'clock, and it goes until about 6. As far as a general outline, the work itself, we don't get into what actually happens during the workshop, because it's so dramatically different each workshop, because it really depends on what each person is bringing. But there is a process, there is a format that we follow. So Friday night is about getting there. We have a couple of exercises that are designed to help people just become present, right? And start to look at and put into the weekend, why are you here? What happened? What's going on? Generally, hi, how are you? Right? And then get them there. Be present, be grounded in the moment, and teach a couple of simple techniques that we're going to utilize and all throughout the weekend as a foundation to continue to do that work, because we have to be present, we have to be grounded, we have to be centered to do this deeper kind of work. Saturday is 4 different opportunities about how you see yourself and how you're seen in the world and how the world sees you. We do a morning exercise. It's designed to see where you stop yourself in terms of expression. We have a monologue portion of the weekend. Remember that the weekend was originally created for actors and actresses who always have 2 or 3 monologues in their pocket, which they're ready to deliver at any moment. So we ask folks to bring a song, a poem, a short story that has meaning and purpose in their life. And then we work with that on Saturday night. Sunday is about release, about expression, about that final release exercise. And then with release comes refilling, right? If you're going to empty this emotional vessel, then let's refill it with what we want it filled with. And those are, the positives, the love and intimacy and connection and support and commitment and laughter and joy and silliness, that all come with, rebuilding who we are, and feeling comfortable about making choices. Because remember, the workshop's about stripping away all the roles you played. Well, you're going to enter back into the world again, and there's roles that need to be played. You need to pick and choose which ones you want. Are you going to set up some new boundaries on the roles that you have? Are you going to eliminate some roles that you've been doing? Are you going to acquire some new roles, some new ways of being that you want to put into the world? So it becomes a deep reset, but also kind of an awakening for some folks, because they didn't know they had choices about how they responded, reacted, how they interacted with the world. They thought they had to do it the way they were taught and told to, because that's what they were taught and told to do. And that is not the case for about 90% of what we respond and react to. We have been taught those things, and we are at choice when we realize that. We're not when we're unconscious. We're not a choice because we're unconscious and we're doing the same thing over. But once we move into that awareness, that choice place, well, now we are aware. So now we can make new choices.
Yes. There were a couple things about the workshop that struck me so much, and that is the amount of men, caring, good, authentic men who were there in a supporting role, because people who've been there before can go back to support those who are active in the workshop that time. And it was an amazing group of people. I mean, there was wonderful people, men and women, but I had never been in a place with such a high percentage of men there, with the barriers down.
Yeah.
This expression of genuineness and humility in the space with each other and supporting each other. Because there were men there participating and active, and we all had stuff. That's why we were there. Come on.
Yeah.
We weren't there because life was roses and rainbows, right? But to see 4, 5, 6 men gathered around a man who was, going through this process of releasing, I mean, it just touched my heart. That this is possible. It's possible. And I want to point that up particularly because there's a lot of men in the community. And, this whole macho thing about I'm strong, I'm tough, I'm just going to make it, that doesn't cut it.
No.
That doesn't cut it.
And that ratio has not been the truth. The truth has been 80-20, 75-25, 75% women, 80% women, 20 to 25% men for decades. And it's only been in the last 4 or 5 years that we've been able to turn that tide. And I think it's due to a strong and active men's group that's grown out of the workshop community, and a strong women's group. But you ladies have always been really good at coming together. You've always been very good. I mean, it's part of, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's part of womanhood that you connect and run your stuff past each other. And men tend to isolate and go into the corner. And what we found is with a solid men's group, we've got men coming back, not only coming back to do their work, but coming back with their partners to do the work together with them to heal that hurt little girl, to heal that hurt little boy, and to be present for each other in that healing. And instead of just being the trigger for it, which we can get into later too, how we're always the trigger and for each other in our relationships, how when we do that on purpose at workshop, we get to go all the way through to the other side, because then we get to also support the moment of healing where they release that hurt that you help trigger for them, and they get to see you as the human being you are, their partner, the person that loves them, the person that's there supporting them in a new light and in a new way. And that creates deeper relationship. It's just been powerful. And I agree. It's so uncommon to see men being deep in their emotions and being free in that place, that it becomes almost overwhelming to see men emoting and to be holding each other and to be present with and looking each other's eyes and just holding your brother's hair back while he pukes, right? It becomes this intimate, deep, powerful experience when in reality it should be normal, right? We should be able to just hold each other while we're sad always. And we've got so many cultural rules and so many societal, you know, regulations about how we interact with each other. And when all the walls are down and it's just raw and real, amazing, beautiful happens, and healing at just quantum levels is possible that you don't ever realize, and that keeps rippling out inside of people for days and weeks after they leave.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think at least 6 weeks to 2 months for me to assimilate, process the changes and discovering the changes that had happened to me while I was there. Melbourne, Florida, and it's easy
Yeah.
access to the interstate. It's easy to get to.
Right off 95, 7 hotels within 2 miles of the workshop site, and yeah, just a beautiful community of wonderful people ready to receive and support your process.
Yes, absolutely. Scott, thank you for coming on. This has
Thank
been amazing.
thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for being with us. Until next time. Bye now.